Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me and the Council President here this morning. First thing I want to do is suggest that any members of the media here that have been reporting over the last couple of days that the sheriff does not believe that my pension reform, Yes for Jacksonville, solves the problem. Here that are reporting that he supports a millage rate increase. It's sloppy work. No one reached out to him. Has anyone seen his statement this morning? Yes. He's got a statement out. He supports my pension reform 100%. He does not support a millage rate increase. And basically information was taken from a draft report that he hasn't even reviewed, nor has President Cost. Overall, the committee's had an opportunity to review these. Pension reform, county referendum number 1, solves the problem. It solves our unfunded pension liability, and it does it by securing a source of revenue without raising taxes. We look at what I've done over the last 2 years working with council. You talk about a commitment to public safety. Many of the naysayers, many of the folks that want to see taxes raised, that's their easy go-to, said we couldn't add police officers, said we couldn't enhance public safety, said we couldn't do infrastructure without a tax increase. The first budget was 40 cops, 40 community service officers, and infrastructure that had been neglected without a tax increase. The budget I just presented doubles down on that without a tax increase. So the issue is not our tax rate. The issue is pension costs. $200 million in pension costs that are above and beyond the normal costs. Those are the tax dollars that we ought to have to be doing the things that we ought to be doing. And I will also point out to you, here's what I've experienced going door to door. Stand on someone's front porch. It's easy for people to sit in corporate boardrooms and say a mill increase won't hurt anyone. On a $100,000 home, that's about $1,000. There are many people in this city that own homes that make a decision on paying their light bill and buying food. How many gallons of milk does $1,000 buy? How many school supplies? How many school lunches? So I'm steadfast. My pension reform, county referendum number 1, Yes for Jacksonville, solves this problem once and for all with a secure source of revenue without raising taxes, and it reforms the pension plan. With that, I'd like to turn it over to the Council President, and then we'll take questions.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to add a couple points and clarifications. Number 1 is the Council looked at alternative sources and ways to pay for liability for at least the last 2 years. And I will tell you that I am absolutely convinced this is the best alternative to address the unfunded pension liability. Now, does it solve every problem that we have in the city of Jacksonville? No, of course it doesn't. But that's the monkey on our back. It's the extra $200 million a year that comes out of our regular budget for unfunded liability that prevents us from doing everything else. And this is the best way available to us to fund that and reduce that obligation on the annual operating budget. Second thing, the suggestion that raising the millage rate is the answer to all of our problems. You need to take into account not only what the mayor said regarding how this impacts regular folks, but also look at the population growth in the surrounding counties. Look at Nassau, Clay, and St. John's and how they are growing so much faster than the city of Jacksonville and what their tax rates are, county tax rates, in comparison to our consolidated government tax rate. What you see is enhanced services there, and people are not, I do not believe that if we increase the millage in Jacksonville just to pay down an obligation on pension, not to increase any services, that we wouldn't even see a greater exodus to the surrounding counties. That's the challenge we have. So we need to find a solution to pay the unfunded liability that doesn't cause all of our residents extraordinary pain from an economic standpoint and cause them to choose to move elsewhere. That's really what we're facing. So I agree with the mayor. I think this is the solution to the unfunded liability with respect, and encourage everyone to vote yes on August 30th.
Any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I mean, we talked about the pension, but there's even if we go back the past 2 years, we say 80 officers, I mean, there's a huge disparity between 80 and 400.
So 147 officers were cut by the previous administration. We are working our way back to making sure that we have the right number of police officers in this city to be a safe city. I work hand in hand with the sheriff on that, and the requests that he has put in the last 2 years, we've been able to make happen. You're referencing a task force report that is in draft that hasn't even been reviewed by the sheriff. I don't know if you wanted to add.
Well, furthermore, I would encourage you to look at the members of the task force. Several members of that task force are on record and have repeatedly encouraged increased resources for JSO. And so it should not be surprising that that would be part of their recommendation, but whether that is the ultimate recommendation and whether that is truly a credible assessment looking at data, again, we're a consolidated government, so if you're comparing to what a municipality and a county have, our whole idea of becoming consolidated was we were going to have economy of resources and efficiency. So I think that it bears looking at some of that, the background behind that recommendation.
Mary's got a little angry, a lot angry actually, but some of the recommendations that were in that report, even though it's a draft, did they make sense to you? Some of the other recommendations besides the property tax increase?
No one can question my commitment to public safety. I've been clear on it, I've been committed to it, and I've delivered on it, and will continue to do that. Have added officers, will continue to add officers, have funded and budgeted for the necessary resources and asks, and will continue to. It's interesting to me that 2 days before absentee ballots drop, the news coverage is nonstop on a draft report that the sheriff hasn't even reviewed, a news cycle that suggests that he supports a tax increase, that suggests that he doesn't believe that our pension reform solves the problem, both of which are wrong. And this is 2 days before absentee ballots drop. It begs a question on motivation. I don't know who and where it's coming from, but it's a big question that ought to be answered.
With Mr. Mayor, the camera's rolling and with a discussion about pension, can you talk to us about the naysayers and folks who say it's a bad idea because of the 2030 component and the $1 billion it would add to total cost in the long run?
So it's not a new tax. We're extending an existing half-penny. So if you're watching this newscast, you go buy something today, you pay sales tax, there's a half-penny in there. If you vote yes on this, that half-penny will be extended. If you don't vote yes on this, if it goes down, that half-penny will go away. By voting yes, we secure that to fund future pension benefits and liabilities. The other alternatives discussed here would be a millage rate increase. It's a bad idea. You can't legally bind property tax dollars to solve a problem. It wouldn't be tied to reforming the pension plans, and it would hurt families. And a new sales tax is not an option.
Why is taking on the $1 billion in what I'll call interest the right choice?
There is no other choice. There is no other choice. A new sales tax is a bad idea. I wouldn't support it, but it would also need the support of the Florida legislature and the governor. They're not going to let that happen. They would never sign off on that. So the debate around a new sales tax is a wasted debate. It's not possible. And a millage rate increase just wouldn't solve it.
Mayor?
And talk about being upset. I get so frustrated. I saw this in the campaign. The easy answer sitting in corporate boardrooms is always raise the millage rate. What's $100 here? What's $200 there? I talk about a $1 million increase on a $100,000 home being $1,000. People that sit in corporate boardrooms may have hundreds of dollars laying around. The front porches that I'm on of homeowners, most of them don't have $100 laying around.
And I would just add that to get to that $1.5 billion additional costs that you're talking about assumes that you have the money to make the prepayments now on the unfunded liability. So the only way you see an increased cost or you see a theoretical savings is if you pay a lot up front and you're putting it in advance. And that also assumes that you're going to earn a good return on the money you're putting in now. If you didn't, you wouldn't see that savings. So this is both less risky because you're matching the timing of the revenue to the timing of the obligation, as opposed to paying it up front early. Yes, you might have a potential savings. You might also have a potential loss that's greater.
Mayor, you talked to public safety unions behind closed doors, talked to WISE, talked to Zona. Have they pushed for millage rate increases at all, the public safety employees?
They haven't pushed me. And let me be clear, whether I've been in public town halls or sitting with folks in meetings where the press wasn't available, I have been consistent and said that this solution is not tied to any promises. It's simply about solving liabilities that we owe, $2.7 billion in liabilities that we owe, and solving it with a secure source of revenue that doesn't raise taxes.
So one thing, the task force report, as I interpreted it, was not saying the plan is not a good idea. What it was saying is we have a sheriff's department that has this sort of laundry list of needs and multi-millions of dollars worth of needs. And I guess what the task force is questioning is whether the city, even having a source of revenue for the pension debt, is going to have enough money to provide for sheriff's deputies in the future. I don't think they're saying the millage rate increase is for the pension debt. They're saying we need more money. And I mean, are you confident that you can address some of the concerns in that report with the money, with our financial situation now, or with it?
Well, we will have the funds we need to make sure that we are a safe city. And I'm not going to address the suggestions in a draft report from a committee. I will address the needs of the sheriff's office with the sheriff, Mike Williams, himself indirectly. And as I stated before, he's laid out his priorities the last 2 years. We've spent a lot of time together, and we've been able to budget for those. So we will continue to do that in the years ahead. In terms of capacity in the operating budget, we solved this unfunded pension liability, and we've had the discussion. There will be budget relief. We will be able to do what we need to do in the years ahead.
Mayor, can I ask on the millage rate? I thought that it was $1,000 per bill, so wouldn't a one mil tax increase for a $100,000 home, that would be...
So after you take the exemption, $500.
$100, okay. Maybe I can circle back to your staff.
Yeah,
I thought
sure.
It was not that big a tax increase.
Sure. Let me tell you what, $100. I mean, this is just, people in this city do not just have $100 laying around. They don't just go out and spend $100 without thinking about it. I mean, this is the reality that we have to grasp as leaders. The president and I were talking about this. She spends a lot of time in the neighborhoods and on front doors too. It brings you back to what people are going through every day, and it has a huge impact on you. I don't know if you want to speak to that at all.
We were just talking beforehand, and I thoroughly enjoyed walking door to door throughout my district during the campaign, but the conversation we were having is what you hear. The people who have a dental issue and can't afford to go to the dentist. The kinds of conversations about people who've lost a job or have retired and are living on their retirement savings. There are a lot of people whose budgets are very, very tight in Jacksonville. We tout ourselves as being this wonderful place for the military to retire, and lots of them choose to retire here. But when you have a lot of retirees, you have people who are on tight budgets. And I think that's one of the things that we have to be cognizant of as we address how our city moves forward. It's not that we don't want to provide quality of life resources and good public safety. Of course we do. But you also have to do it in a way that our citizens can lead their daily lives and afford to pay their bills.
Mayor, would you describe a city as being in dire straits?
We have a huge burden on our back, $2.7 billion in unfunded pension liabilities, money that we owe, benefits that were earned, It's been largely ignored. Council has tried to work on it the last couple of years, but you've got to have someone in leadership that's willing to state it, own it, and solve it, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. If we solve our unfunded pension liability, if we get a yes vote on August 30th on county referendum number 1, it is a brand new day for the city of Jacksonville. If we don't solve it, it's going to be a really, really, really tough future. You want to talk about millage rate increases. 6 tax increases over just over a decade, 3 new millage rates, 3 new fees, and we're still sitting here having a conversation about some are suggesting that we ought to continue to tax our citizens more. And by the way, with those new taxes, city services have suffered, and this is all because we haven't solved the pension liabilities.
How will this tie into eventually getting some downtown development happening? Looking at the Landing, looking at Berkman, getting some more things happening downtown. How does this all tie together?
Look, whether it's potholes in certain zip codes, infrastructure that's falling apart all around our city, to downtown, to every neighborhood. I mean, this is all, it's all tied up in our inability to do some of the things we ought to be doing because of the unfunded pension liabilities and the pension costs. Almost 1/3 of our operating budget this year will go to pension costs. That means that people are paying tax dollars in. Those tax dollars are going to pension costs instead of going to the things that they care about, which could be roads, infrastructure, and development.
Now, with that being said, as we all know, the Jags need a training camp today. And the last couple off seasons, tens of millions of dollars have been put in the direction towards the Jags for projects that they've asked for. In light of what's happening with the city, how much further can something like that continue each off season, tens of millions of dollars benefiting the Jags?
The work that's been done with the Jaguars over the last couple of years has been the bed tax, which by state law, you can't use those dollars for any of the things we're talking about. You can't hire cops with those dollars. You can't fund public safety with those dollars. You can't pave roads with those dollars. You can't do infrastructure with those dollars.
Mayor, have you talked to this committee when they were preparing their report at all? Did you interview with them at all?
No.
So they never talked to the city?
No.
Does that surprise you?
I mean, I think the president suggested there may be some members on that committee that have been preaching for a tax increase long before this committee was put together. So look, I'll work directly with the sheriff on what his needs are.
Mayor, if it was the committee's recommendation or the task force recommendation on about 400 officers, and they're saying, well, you got to do the sales tax and a property tax to do that. If you just do the half-cent sales tax, is there going to be enough freed up revenue that if you decided that 400 really is the best course, you can do that? Or you really say, well, half-cent sales tax, you get 147, that's as far as you can go with your expansion of police officers?
Again, I'm not going to comment on a draft report from a task force that the sheriff hasn't even reviewed. But as the sheriff continues to share with me the needs that he has to make this a safe city, I'm going to do everything that I can to make that happen. And if without pension reform, I'm going to, through my budgetary priorities, see a massive shift geared back towards public safety. That means areas that are already suffering will have to suffer more. That said, I believe we're going to get a yes vote on August 30th. I'm spending a lot of time in the community talking about this, and it's clear to me that when I educate voters on how severe this is and how dire this is, but that this could fundamentally change our city in a positive way, I'm changing minds.
What's your analysis of how, does the community get it, the situation we're in, and how your proposition would intervene?
Yes, when you get the opportunity to share with them and take questions, I think that one of the most powerful things that we can do as elected officials is make our speeches as short as possible and then open the floor for questions and answer every question, and that's what I've been doing. And when I go into rooms of people that are undecided, but they have a lot of questions on the issue, once I answer and explain, I walk out of there feeling like people get it.
Just wanted to follow up. You said over the past decade there have been 6 tax increases, property tax hikes. Is that what that is?
3 new fees and 3 millage rate increases.
Are you talking about the garbage the JEA fee, those fees.
The 3 fees that you implement, yes. We can get you the specifics on those, but yes.
Councilwoman Boyer, here's a question for you. You talked about the population going to the suburbs and not here. How do we fight the larger problem of legacy cost as it relates to, city finances, pension, infrastructure, deferrals, all of that, and actually get population back into Jacksonville, not moving to Clay and Nassau and so forth?
Well, obviously, solving the pension is a big part of it. I mean, that's the first step, because the thing we keep talking about is if you look at our billion-dollar budget and you assume that the normal cost that you would normally be paying is about $80 million for the pension liability, and we're paying $280 million. So $200 million out of the billion, a fifth of the city budget that is discretionary dollars that you could use on downtown development, that you could use on enhanced Hemming Plaza or park programs, that you could use on the kinds of things that attract residents, the quality of life things. Obviously, with the remaining 800, we got to pay the debt service. We don't have any choices about that. The things that are mandatory are getting paid. But that 200 is all the discretionary dollars that can make the city better. And that's why it's so important that we solve this issue, take that monkey off our back, and then look at the bigger picture. I also think that there is an opportunity going forward, and I'm going to be talking to the mayor about it, to do a much better job of coordinating with our independent authorities, other local government, state government, about how we use various funding sources in coordination to accomplish some of those legacy infrastructure challenges.
And I think we saw an example of some of that in this budget that was presented, where the JTA has allocated federal grant dollars that they have for some of the ADA requirements we have to fund this year. All right.
Real quick, you talked about the team earlier. SMG is accepting a big award for the stadium today, and obviously that's a big part of the budget. I don't know if you can lose that or not.
I can catch up with you on that one later. We are going to the playoffs this year, though. Nate, did you have another question?
Well, I did, yeah. I wanted to ask, your initial reaction to the task force report, you said this millage rate increase, this is something the elites typically recommend. Are the task force members, are those like the elite, and is that what you were saying?
People sit around in boardrooms and conference rooms and make decisions about how to tax people without having any understanding of what $100, what $500, what $1,000 means to families that own homes, by the way. And I'll tell you, my reaction was, we've had a news cycle since yesterday that would lead citizens to believe that the sheriff doesn't believe that my pension reform goes far enough. Not true. He believes it, he stated it, has supported it since the beginning, and also leads people to believe, I believe it's even been said, that he supports a millage rate increase. Also not true. This, in the news cycle, 2 days before absentee ballots drop, seems purely political to me, so you're darn right I'm upset about it.
Where do you think it came from?
Political agenda. I'm going to move on and keep fighting my fight for people of Jacksonville and try to get this pension reform passed.